Yeah, and now I record. Now I'm recording. So on, go.
Okay, I was just saying thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to present our paper in the webinar. I'm happy to be here and thank you all for attending. I'm happy you're all interested in trust. But this paper is a kind of deviation maybe from the regular discussion on trust. We are offering a new concept and looking forward to hearing your thoughts on it. And I also want to give a bit of a background, how we got to even start thinking about this concept of misaligned trust. So it started a few years ago when David and I and other colleagues, we were studying the relationship between trust and regulation. And we saw that the literature is only looking at absolute levels of trust to assess relationship with regulation levels and styles, and understanding that levels of trust in the government and in market entities in society has a relationship and can affect the type of regulation, whether it's more responsive or more strict. But it was also very clear to us that the gap between the different types of trust matter. So if there is a bigger gap and the trust in market is much higher than trust in regulation, that should definitely affect how regulation is designed. So we started looking into relationships between trust types, and we developed different measures to explore that. We call that, as David presented it today, a trust ecology. And this paper focuses on the gap between three types of trust, between social trust, governmental trust, and market trust. And more specifically, we want to explore whether this gap matters for democratic outcomes, for democratic quality indicators. So the background for this paper, in terms of the theory, is that we already know that there's a vast literature showing the importance of social trust for different democratic outcomes. It's important for civic engagement, for collective action, and for voluntary compliance. We know that trust in government has important outcomes, such as legitimacy, compliance, rule of law. Maybe as a side note, we can also say that in terms of trust in government and democracy, we also read Pippa Norris's book that actually says that some distrust is also important for democracy. So we don't only want to see high trust, we also want to see some levels of distrust to ensure a lively civilhood, participation, that needs some level of distrust. So this relationship between trust and democracy goes in different directions. And finally, in terms of trust in market actors, this was the least studied. We could really barely find research on this topic. So if someone found something and wants to share with us, we would be very happy. But the few papers we did find that explored the relationship between trust in market actors and macro results or governance variables or democratic variables showed that there is a correlation between trust in companies, trust in market actors, and overall macroeconomic performance. And also, like we started this issue, we did see that the more trust in market actors, the less demand for regulation. But there isn't a lot on this topic. And the main issue with all of these studies is that despite the fact that they do make a point that the trust matters for democratic outcomes and for governance, they focus each time on one type of trust. So they study it in a unidimensional way, and they look at one type of trust and that effect on different types of outcomes. And they don't look at the relationship between different types of trust. They don't look at the gap between different types of trust. So they overlook perhaps something that we all overlooked, we didn't look at. The other issue with the current literature is that often countries are classified as high trust, low trust. And this is done in some quantitative studies, but also in many sociological papers or qualitative papers, comparative studies that classify countries to this very simplistic high trust, low trust. And this obviously hides the differences, not within countries. So the differences within each country in their levels of trust. So high trust on which type of trust? High trust in social trust or in trust in governance? And what happens if those two are not aligned and they go in different directions? So we thought it's time to present a new concept that looks specifically at those relationship between the three types of trust. So we define trust misalignment as the degree of divergence, so the degree of gap among citizens' trust in each other, that is social trust in government, and trust in market actors. And our question is, does trust misalignment independently predict democratic quality indicators? So independently, in the sense that when you control for trust levels, because we already know that trust levels matter for democratic outcomes. So when you control for them, does the misalignment in itself has an effect? Does it matter? Well, this figure just tries to visualize the two different approaches I just described, looking at each type of trust separately versus looking at their configuration. So our main hypothesis. So we build on our main argument that we build on is that democratic quality requires both horizontal and vertical coordination working together. So horizontal coordination is when citizens are willing to cooperate with other people, to participate in collective actions, to monitor shared resources, or more specifically, the government. And vertical coordination is the coordination between citizens and the state or other institutions. So the willingness to comply with rules, to accept decisions, to engage with processes. But in democracy, we need both of these. Neither alone is sufficient. So the interaction between them will determine whether this will result into democratic capacity. And perhaps the wider the misalignment is, the wider the distances between social trust and trust in government and trust in market actors, then the more friction there is that disables democracy, or at least creates friction and avoids it to become more higher quality and better scores and better outcomes. So the main hypothesis is that more trust alignment would lead to worse democratic qualities, again, independently of the absolute trust levels. But then we developed two other hypotheses, additional ones. One has to do with the time. We hypothesize that the effect is not immediate, that it takes time to manifest, or to, forgot the word, to become a reality. So it will take time it's a cumulative process that starts with the trust misalignment, but it cumulatively results in lower democratic outcomes. And the third hypothesis is it's an interaction hypothesis, where we say that misalignment is about the alignment of different trust levels. But obviously, the absolute level, whether overall they're misaligned, but overall trust is high, or they're misaligned, but overall trust is low, or aligned and overall high, aligned, overall low, is different. And we should expect different results in those situations. And more specifically, we hypothesize that when overall trust is low, then governance systems don't depend on trust. They will rely more on strict regulation, on enforcing rules. They won't rely on voluntary processes and processes that require trust. So then the misalignment will have a lower effect. Whereas when overall trust is higher, their trust misalignment would be more impactful. So we expect a stronger negative effect of trust misalignment in societies with overall higher mean trust levels. Okay, so to test this data, to test our hypothesis, we started with world value survey data. to first create the measure of trust misalignment. Before this paper, we have another paper where we really explored different data sets and comparative studies. And it was very hard to find data sets that have longitudinal data assessing market trust. This is a question that doesn't appear in most surveys. So we were quite limited in which data sets we could use to test our measure. So we eventually chose the World Value Survey because they do have two questions. They have a question on trust in major companies and trust in banks. And to measure social trust, we created a composite measure, a mean of two items, trust in most people and trust in strangers, because we try to grasp trust in people you don't know personally. So this is not about how much you trust your family, it's about how much you trust other people. Trust in government, we wanted to create also a composite measure looking at the three branches. So we included trust in government, trust in civil services, trust in parliament, and trust in the justice system. And as you can see also the internal consistency, you see that they're high alpha, so that kind of validates our choice. Also for market trust. And then after we created these composite scores, we created the misalignment measures. So because we have three measures, three items for trust, these three, and we're looking into the gap, we actually need three different measures that look at different pairs of trust. So the gap between government trust and social trust is this first measure. The gap between government trust and market trust is the second measure, and the gap between market trust and social trust is the third measure. And we deducted, oh, wait, that's too soon. We deducted one type of trust from the other. Wait, okay, here we go. And for the democratic quality indicators, we used mostly VDEM dataset that has annual data on different aspects of democracy. We also use the polity measure. And for control variables, as we said, we controlled for absolute levels of trust. So these measures themselves were control variables, but we also controlled for GDP per capita and a human development indicator, which is a social capital development indicator that we wanted to control for too. So, well, this is a list of the indicators we used for as our outcome indicators, the democratic quality indicators. And to test our hypothesis, we identified two main steps, which was first regression, pooled OLS, where our outcome is lagged. So we wanted to test whether the effect of misalignment on our outcome, on our democratic indicators, happens after time. So we lagged it in 5 years and in 10 years with our controls. The second test was the moderation regression. And then we also added another test. We wanted to see whether maybe the effect or the importance of misalignment also goes in the other direction. So not only if misalignment predicts democracy, like our main research question asks, but also perhaps it goes the other way around. Maybe democratic levels affects misalignment. So after we merge the different data sets, this is the size of our sample. And I'll start with the descriptive findings. So first of all, when we looked at our data, and this is the WVS data at this stage, we see that trust misalignment is a significant feature of the data. So in most cases, in most observations, there is a gap. So trust is not aligned in most cases. And this was found for two types of the misalignment, two measures, which is the misalignment between government and society and the misalignment between market and society. There we can see here the size of the gap, so the average gap. And when it comes to the misalignment between government and market, there wasn't a big misalignment. Those two types of trust overall were in the same around the same levels. We also looked at how the data changes across the years. Don't know why my computer is not responding. Okay, here we go. So here we can see the 3 misalignment measures over time. Okay, so this is not absolute trust. This is the gap, just visualizing the gap itself. The purple is the gap between trust in government and trust in society. And we see that it's almost always above 0, so positive in the sense that because it's calculated as government minus society. So when it's positive, it means that there is more trust. There is a misalignment, but there is more trust in government related to society. So we see that it's overall consistent. There are some dips, but overall trust in government is higher than trust in society. So maybe this is also an interesting finding in its own. I teach a course on trust, and my students were very surprised about this, saying they always assume that trust in government is the lowest, and that's where most of the attention goes. And how can we fix trust in government? But this actually shows us that there is a gap, but it's on the other direction. Actually, trust in government it's higher than trust in society. And also the orange line is the gap between trust in market and trust in society. And here we see similar results. I don't know how interesting this graph is. It's just descriptive. I'm going to move to our main findings. There's also one more descriptive, very hard to read, I know, but plotting all the countries in our sample and showing their misalignment level on the 3 types. Maybe the colors, we can't really read the names of the countries here, but we can see the colors, and we can see that in this government market trust, we see mostly green. So this means the countries in our sample are mostly aligned, balanced, and the red and orange are misalignment. So this visualizes what I just described, how most misalignment is between government and social, and between market and social. We do see maybe something interesting here, that some countries that were assumed to have high trust, like Sweden, we suddenly see that they have actually a misalignment. So maybe it is interesting, maybe it does validate the importance of this measure, because it allows us to see countries that were previously just assumed to have high trust. Suddenly we see they do have some misalignment in them. So maybe there is something that was hidden that this measure allows us to see. Now, main findings. So here are the regression result for our first hypothesis, which is that trust misalignment leads to worse democratic outcomes. And yes, we see that the misalignment that is most impactful, the one that has more significant results, is the gap between government and society. And we see that even when controlling for the absolute levels of trust, this measure, the gap, can predict or can affect negatively these different democratic outcomes. And just to remind you, the way we constructed our measure, this is when government is higher than social trust. So when this gap occurs, then there are negative effects. We also see some negative effects for the other types of misalignment, for less indicators, but also for some indicators. And they also, interestingly, happen more after 10 years. So I don't know, maybe we can say that those misalignments also matter, but it takes longer maybe for their effect to come into place.
Libby, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
So, sorry, so each line here is it's a different model, right? So the outcome is on your...
It's in the rows. Yes, it's the opposite way.
So
the outcome, there's the rows, and the dependent and the independent variable are columns.
But each one of them is separately. T+5 and T+10 are separate, right?
Separately, yes.
Okay.
There were actually several models running, and this is a summary of all of them just to make it easier to read, but they weren't run, we didn't run them together.
Thank you.
Important question. Okay, so the second question is about the moderation, the interaction between overall mean level of the average level of trust in a country. And there was, if we would have controlled for absolute levels of trust, there would be a collinearity issue. So here we only control for GDP and the development score. And then we interacted with overall levels of trust. And we see that we understand this based on the negative coefficients. We understand that the more a country has overall higher levels of trust, then the effect of misalignment, the negative effect of misalignment is significant. So this means that it becomes stronger. So misalignment does matter more in societies with high trust compared to societies with low trust. We do see that overall there's no significant results at all for the misalignment between market and society. And this is already repeating what we saw in the slide before. We understand this type of misalignment matters less. And finally, when we run this reverse causality, we also see some significant results. Specifically, we see more for government, the misalignment between government and market, but also for the misalignment between government and society. So we see that misalignment and that democracy at one point can also predict future misalignment. So there is no way to establish causal relationships based using our method. So this is a limitation of our study. We did establish that it is an interesting measure and also that it exposes new trends in data and characteristics of countries that were overlooked before, and that it has positive, it has a significant but negative effect on democratic qualities. The two types of misalignment that were the most important are misalignment between government and market and misalignment between government and society. And the third was less important or had less effects. And yeah, so I'm going to stop here and I'm looking forward to hearing your responses to this paper. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Libby. Let me remove with it. So I'm inviting comments. Hello, John and Valerie. Nice to see you. It's midnight in Australia, right? Or close to midnight in Australia. So a lot of, so please, anyone wants to start?
I have a question.
Please. And focus afterwards, please.
Sure. Hi, Libby. Very interesting, and I like the concept of the three components. One question that I have is, how do you control for the effects of the culture or specific countries' effects on your results? Meaning the fact that you are doing this one minus the other or looking for the distance is taking care of a situation where the effect of the specific country variables like culture or history are the same on all three dimensions. But if they are not the same, then just doing this difference between the values will actually affect your overall comparison.
Thank you, Amir. Libby, do you want to answer?
Maybe can I take some more questions and then?
Yeah, so Marcus, please.
Thank you.
We don't hear you, Marcus. Unmute yourself.
Yeah. Thank you, Libby. That was most interesting. I wondered
if you have looked, my first question really related to countries, if you have any data on countries. But you mentioned that there's kind of the gaps. You talked about the government society gap or the misalignment, and then the date, I think it was corporate, or not, maybe not corporate, but market gap. And to some extent, we're seeing in kind of the populism that's developing today that that's being driven by social media, which kind of puts the relationship between the different trust elements slightly more in the kind of glare. To what extent did you look at this and see to what extent relationships between the trust elements or the gaps had an influence?
Just to understand the question, do you mean to what extent do these gaps influence each other, the relationship between
Yeah.
More questions? More questions?
Yeah. Jennifer is raising her hand. I can see.
Jenny, please.
Oh, thanks. Really fascinating. Thanks, Libby and David. A theory question. I'll be curious to hear your thoughts on it. I'd like to hear more why you think there should be an alignment of trust between the three factors and specifically of government and market. So I'll say when you mention the example of Sweden, I know from my Swedish colleagues and the work that we do that, so trust in government is very high. Trust in markets isn't so much, right? The welfare states, like they're going to trust more in the welfare state that they very, very strongly invest in and believe in and is important to the society than a corporation. So, interested to hear your theoretical ideas on that.
Thank you. Libby, maybe you want to go? 3 questions.
Sure.
And then we will have more, I'm sure.
It's a good time to respond. Okay, thank you all for your questions. So I'll start with Amir. So yes, you asked about the effect of the culture. So we didn't control for anything else beyond what I showed. So we didn't control for other characteristics of countries or cultural aspects or regime type. We didn't. So that's the answer. But not to say that we should have maybe or should do this in our next version. We were the only thing we really thought about ourselves was to control for the regime type, but so that specifically because the World Value Survey includes non-democracies, and that seemed relevant and important. But I don't have any ideas for other variables that can control for cultural aspects. And if you know any, and I would love to hear if you have a specific idea of how to control for that cultural aspect.
Yes, meaning there are simple things that you can do. For example, you can cluster some of the countries together, give them like a specific dummy variable for the Scandinavian, for the South American, for the European ones, for the East European ones.
Got it.
Continents, yeah.
It can be based on continent or based on similar culture and stuff like that. There are some research papers that did much more than that and have some kind of index for cultures and so on. If you can address me, I think that I have it in my records. I can find it for you.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Marcus, we didn't explore the relationship between the misalignment. We did look at the correlation between trust types, but it's not the same. It's not what you asked. We do have some, I don't know, mathematical maybe issue that these measures are highly related because they're using the same type. They're building on the same origin indicators. They're building on trust. So I can assume they are highly correlated. But yeah, maybe this is something we can explore. I hope that answers your question. You mentioned also the effect of social media. I don't know if this is something we can do in this study, but yeah, did that answer your question or?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And Jennifer, yes, okay. I like this question about why do we even think there should be an alignment? We don't necessarily, and I think maybe the word alignment maybe is confusing in that sense. We wanted to look at the relationship between trusts, and we do believe that they matter for democracy, but we also, and I mentioned it with regarding to trust in government, even trust in government, you can make a point that some distrust matters. So maybe you don't want full, blind trust in the government and full trust in society. So we're not normatively saying that we want high trust in all. And of course, same goes to what you said, trust in market actors. That's not what we were trying to say. We are still trying to explain this, that we're looking at the alignment in the sense that do they go in the same direction? Not necessarily all high, but are they overall the same, or are there big gaps? Because big gaps can explain, that's where we started from, big gaps will explain, like I started with, different demand for regulation. Okay, so when you have high trust in the government but very low trust in companies, that can support stronger regulation, and this is just one example, one configuration. But we also think that big gaps can also impede democratic functions. So when there is low trust in society, and what we really see, then different democratic mechanisms, accountability, strong civil society can't really hold. What happens if that comes with a higher trust in government or lower trust in market? We don't know. So we're not normatively saying we want high trust in all three. That's not what we're saying. And I see how that term can be confusing. We were really struggling with finding a good term, but yeah, we're not saying that.
Let me add to that aspect. So we started to see first, say about a year and a half before, started to say, do we have a problem of trust overall in all countries all over the world? If we have a problem of trust, is it social trust, economic trust, political trust? And we were gathering data, and others did the same, but only on one type of trust. And I think we were we are among the few who were trying to look at the dynamic between different types of trust. So what we find first and foremost is that the problem of trust is probably very severe in some countries, say Anglo-Saxon countries, and it's mostly about social trust all over the world, less about political trust. And for us, it was surprising in a way. Another surprising aspect was that relative trust in corporation and big major companies and even banks was relatively high. Even after the 2008 financial crisis, there was a decline, and then quickly jumped up. Now, when you look at that and you see that the literature is not really looking at those kind of different dimensions of trust, you may want to ask yourself, what is the relation between say, we called it ecology of trust, and to what extent high and low really capture what we should look at. Should we continue to do, say, quantitative studies around one type of trust, using one indicator, average, of 2 indicators, 3 indicators, and so on. So we are thinking about the ecology of trust, and some of you will be also interested to know that we are looking also at the ecology of regulations. So meaning, say, think about the countries that has high regulation on product market or on labor market, but very, very low transparency regulation. What does it mean? Are they high or low on regulation? Can we look beyond one specific indicators and look at the connection and the interaction between indicators? And Jenny asked the correct answer, the one I would expect her to ask. Why alignment, and to what extent you can give a more theoretical outlook or in-depth analysis of the alignment concept. And I think we should do that. And we are on the way, in a sense. But it's also all of this is a function of the ecology of trust and the relative relations between different types of trust, and relative trust is just one of them. That's my speech.
Just to add briefly, my question came from a place of curiosity and excitement at the potential here. Libby, it was like nod of, in the sense of, I haven't seen a paper. I've seen a lot of work on trust, but I haven't seen a paper that looks at market trust together with the other kinds of trust. And I think there's more room for theorizing. And that you as an author team and the broader team, like, you may even be able to develop some expectations about what you see might be the key gaps and misalignments that are theoretically important, so that the main approach isn't just the critique of what is misaligned, but rather what are our theoretical expectations for where gaps might exist and why that's important. For example, last comment about markets and AI. So in different countries, right? So there's a different prominence of corporations versus government and AI governance. And if you all can identify that gap in this broader ecology theoretical approach, it could be really exciting in terms of laying out future agendas.
Yeah. I completely agree, and thank you for the excitement. And you're right. We both, David and I, agree that there's still work to be done theoretically in explaining the importance, the meaning of gaps. We're still working. We're still in the beginning of the process.
Yeah. Let's take more questions or comments. John, please unmute yourself.
I shouldn't ask a question having been out tonight at a dinner party drinking alcohol, but I'll give it a go anyhow. I'm inclined to want to ask the question, if you have, on average, a low trust society across all kinds of trust, because there's some definite correlation among them, then misalignment might open up some opportunities for a starting point for, say, building society, some sort of hook to hang on to making regulation effective and all the dependent variables you're interested in. You might think that if you have a high trust society that is aligned trust, that will be a highly resilient society, a society where social capital will make something like regulation more doable, more effective. But if you have high average trust, but misalignment, there are vulnerabilities to democracy. There are vulnerabilities to the capabilities of regulation. So, I'd be curious, particularly to look at the low trust but alignment. What does that look like?
Thank you, John.
Could I in here to just follow up on that, because it was a similar thing that I was thinking of. I was at the same dinner party, by
He
the
didn't
way.
drink as much as me, so this will be better.
No, that's true. But is there, and this goes back to the theoretical point, is there a hope story here that across the world we're seeing issues of homelessness, we're seeing concerns about immigration. So low social trust kind of resonates with our time. But if you're hopeful, then you're going to see government as a solution, the structures of government, not necessarily those who are governing at the moment, but the institutions as hope for change. And perhaps we're seeing hope in illiberal regimes or governments or political systems on the rise for that reason. I haven't thought through the implications of it in terms of your regression, all your regressions and your reverse regressions as well. But it just strikes me that it's worth exploring the hope issue, hope in institutions at a time when people are feeling quite frightened and scared about collective sustainability.
Yeah, thank you both, Valerie and John. I think what's behind your question makes a lot of sense. So John said maybe the overall high trust provides a capital, social capital, and that can protect from misalignment. But we saw that the results we controlled for overall trust level, and we saw that it doesn't when it comes to democratic outcomes. So we saw that it doesn't provide that shield, and also the opposite when there is low trust. And then it's interesting what you said, John, that this misalignment in low trust context can signal some changes coming, but that doesn't lead to better democratic outcomes. We do have the results for that. So while I agree with, I think the reason behind your question makes a lot of sense. I think this study already shows that it doesn't hold. But for Valerie's question, we don't measure hope. And I don't think the question in the survey about trusting government is about hope. And it could be a really interesting other question to ask if in low trust societies, maybe hope goes somewhere or needs to go, like how can people be despaired and trust is low overall, then maybe that will turn into hope or some other variables. But we only looked at trust, and you were both right that they are correlated. So in that sense, we can't really answer your question about hope with this measure, I think. But we could use at least John's question to take also Jennifer's suggestion to better theorize and go more in depth into what does misalignment really mean in different types of society. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answers, but
what's the difficulty, Libby? What's
what's my difficulty? My challenge? My biggest challenge is exactly that, the theorizing the role of the gap, the misalignment, independently. So this is all in our brains, right? Analytically, surgically removing it from levels of trust. So if we just think of the gap as a concept, what's that effect? And that's very hard exercise to do. It's this is why theoretically I didn't advance more than what you saw. It's much easier to do this exercise of when trust in government is high, but trust in society is low, then that will lead to these and those democratic mechanisms, etc. But that's not exactly gap. I think Ilya also pointed this out in a previous presentation we had. It's looking at how does the interaction of two different, trust levels, what are their effects? But gap is more about the distance, and this is something that's hard for me to develop a theory around. So even though
So
we do
it's
have results, yeah.
There is imbalance, and we regress the imbalance together with the size, the absolute size of trust in our. So we capture the effect of imbalances in trust, in trusting or distrusting societies on democratic outcomes. And we want to do it later on regulatory outcomes or growth outcomes and so on. But mostly it's about looking at trust in a more systematic, holistic way, but still keeping the quantitative measure and the mathematical statistical approach also in the center.
Well, theoretically, it's easier for me to explain how imbalance matters for regulatory design. So if overall trust is low in society, and also low in government, we know that would justify command and control type of regulation. Whereas when there is, and that's maybe overall aligned trust, but aligned and low. But then when there is misalignment, it depends on which type of misalignment, but those are regulatory outcomes. When we talk about democratic outcomes, there's still work we need to do in being able to really theorize what exactly the imbalance does. Yeah.
But regulatory outcomes are also democratic outcome in many senses. The distinction is regulation is not only about the economy, but also the structuring of the democratic institutions. But in economics is also as the democratic aspects very important.
Yeah. Libby, I was thinking a bit about in people who talk about the history many centuries ago of the relationship between the evolution of capitalism and also the evolution of high trust democracy. They'll say, well, you get those societies where markets evolved. So there's a misalignment. So there's an emergence of high trust in markets, which is a new historical phenomenon. And according to those theorists, most of them economic historians, they say, well, capitalism is the driver of democracy. It's a misalignment where you have high trust in markets that helps you to build trust in governments, social trust, and so on. I'm not sure how right that is, but it's one form of the argument that you have low trust, but a misalignment breakout, which allows the building of alignment across time.
So then you would say, John, that this is a basis for an hypothesis that says that in misalignment, where social trust is high but trust in government is low, then democracy should benefit from it.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's an argument for looking at those cases where you have low trust, but the possibility of good kinds of misalignment.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think we could do that theoretically, but now when we already have the results, it's all even harder because we already know that this hypothesis will not be confirmed with the data.
The overall result that combines the effects of low and high with breaking out and just looking at one box of lows and asking just with the low trust societies, what happens when there's that tension of a breakout into misalignment? I think there could be interest in that, and it could be a different result from your more aggregated results across all levels of trust. Could be. Yeah. Probably not, though, when you've got the data that
maybe
you've got.
It could be worth exploring, and we'll give it a try and see if we see different results if we split it to low trust societies and high trust societies, and it's definitely worth exploring at this stage. So we'll keep you updated.
One issue is the analysis is that we have about 18, at least in the latest wave of the World Value Survey, we have 18 measures of institutional and social trust, mostly about institutionals, but also on social trust. And we are using here about 6 or 5 measures. So this is something that we are doing with Ilya, going beyond the 5, but not necessarily to the misalignment. We might check misalignment. But let me ask you if you want to have more questions, more comments. We have about 5 minutes until we finish. Don't be shy.
We can finish 2 minutes earlier.
Yeah, we can. So few words from you, Libby, to finalize.
I want to thank everyone for their time and for their generosity and sharing their thoughts and suggestions. And yeah, and as I said, on the one hand, it's very exciting. It's really exciting to focus on a new measure, and we have nice results. But on the other hand, we still have work to do, and as you saw, and I hope we will be able to deliver and to improve this paper. And then obviously we want to publish it. So we'll keep you updated on that. And thank you so much.
Thank you all. Have a good night in Canberra, a good day, good evening in Europe and Israel, wherever you are.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.